Welcome to Wei and Cathy show. I'm your host Wei Fang. And yesterday, two major things happened to our country. Okay, and today I also saw a opinion commentary on the Wall Street Journal, and make me feel really, how to say, both strong and special. So today I want to talk about these two matters as well as my feeling after reading that article. All right, so two major things yesterday. First is the $740 billion Inflation Reduction Act was passed by the Congress and also signed by the President Biden after winning the consent of Joe Manchin, the West Virginia senator. And the reason why it can pass with a mere, simple majority because this is a reconciliation budget. Okay, any reconciliation budget act does not have to go through its own separate path. Does not have to face the filibuster, which can only be overcome by the 60-vote majority in the Senate. So every year, the reconciliation path can only be used once. So the Democrat Party used this to pass this $740 billion budget, and so what is reconciliation? Because it's basically the Senate passed their own budget and the House passed their own budget. They are not the same, so it would take a reconciliation process. That's called reconciliation. And then in that case, only 50-vote simple majority would pass this, okay? So what's the impact of the Inflation Reduction Act upon the country? And I want to talk about that later, maybe tomorrow or the day after, okay? It is have quite significant impact to our country. And why it passed, what kind of impact it would have, let me leave this to another time. And the second matter that happened to our country is the Congresswoman Liz Cheney from Wyoming was defeated in the primary in the state of Wyoming. And she would no longer have an opportunity to run on behalf of the Republican Party, and her tenure at the House will be stopped. So in order to save the situation before the election, he called for the Democrat Party and independent to help him. And then from the statistics, now we know that probably there are more than 10,000 Democrat Party members change their party affiliation and try to support him as a Republican. But anyway, they are still outnumbered, and Liz Cheney lost with a gap of as big as 37%. So she really had no chance. So okay, today this opinion commentary was written by a gentleman called Phil Gramm. Do you know Phil Gramm? If you're old enough and around here, you probably know him. He's not only an economist, he's also the three-time senator from the state of Texas. Okay, 18 years in the U.S. Senate. Okay, so in this opinion commentary, he said he was serving with President Ronald Reagan. He said when Reagan first stepped into the White House, he also faced a reconciliation budget act. So similar to today, but the story is completely different. So today he wants to, in this article, he recall those two stories about President Reagan, which is real, which is, nobody knows. So I want to just, convey this story to you. I feel it's very special story that I think should be remembered by everybody, but probably very few people. Maybe only Phil Gramm himself knows about this. Anyway, so he said in 1980, Phil Gramm said, I was a freshman Democratic congressman from Texas. And there's another Republican congressman from Michigan. His name is David Stockman. And Phil Gramm and David Stockman worked together to create a substitute for President Carter's final budget. But then Carter was defeated. He left the White House, and Reagan stepped in, and Reagan appointed Stockman as the director of the Office of Management and Budget. So basically, he became a cabinet, work for the cabinet. So the Phil Gramm then picked another a GOP congressman, and his name is Latta, okay, Gilbert Latta from Ohio. So they joined handily and create another budget for President Reagan. Yeah, And then, okay, so he said, and that law is called the Gramm Latta budget. Okay, it's quite famous looking back today and very transformative. Anyway, but when the budget was in the House, okay, although it's a dramatic change in public policy, but initial vote set only broad parameters, okay, and cut no programs, and was easily passed. Okay, then it came to the reconciliation bill. The reconciliation bill implementing was the most, okay, just passing the reconciliation bill was the most difficult vote of the Reagan's era, okay? And then because the reconciliation bill contains the largest post-war cuts in the domestic spending and eliminated the 3 Social Security benefits to address the impending bankruptcy of the system. So while there were strong arguments for ending each of those add-on benefits, a vote to eliminate them, okay, meant touching the third rail and endangering a lawmaker's career. Yeah, it could threaten their career. So as the House vote approached, some 30-some, okay, Republican asked for a meeting with the president and to demand a change in the reconciliation bill. Okay, sort of like I mentioned, right? Was not agree with his president and they tried to demand change, kind of similar. And so Phil Gramm was asked to join the discussion because he was one of the original author. And before the meeting, Phil Gramm was taken to the Oval Office to meet with Reagan. And Reagan asked him, so what do you think we should do here? And the Phil Gramm said, well, before I offer my service, okay, I need to remind you that 3 years ago, I was merely teaching college economics, okay? And I have never done anything remotely this important in my life. So Reagan smiled and said, well, doesn't matter, neither do I. So they were just laughing, okay? So when they stopped laughing, Phil Gramm asked, if we fix one group's problems, won't another group demand change? Where do we stop? Okay, so without responding, Reagan got up and led the way to the meeting. Okay, and then they got to the meeting and sit down at the cabinet table. The president said to those 30 people, you call this meeting, okay? So let me hear to what you have to say. The first speaker assured the president that he was for I'm for your program, all for it, okay? But I have a problem with my constituents, okay? It quickly became clear that the attendees has planned this all out. Okay, they all have what they were going to say, and almost every member raised concerns about his constituency. So when they all have spoken, hear me out. The president said nothing for what seems like 5 minutes as he looked at each of the 30 members in puzzled silence. After 5 minutes, Reagan said, I've been confused. I thought this vote was about the future of our country. I didn't know it was about our political constituencies. Then Reagan got up and walked out of the room. So the stunned silence continued in the room for several more minutes. And then they start to get up and they leave the room. More than a few congressmen teared up as they got up. So a few days later, when the final vote was taken, no one person who had been in that room voted no. So Phil Gramm said Reagan was more than a leader who knew who he was and what he wanted to do. And he was a man who could keep things in perspective. So with the economy enduring double dip at that time, double dip recessions, Republicans lost 26 House seats in 1982, the midterm. And even with the support of the conservative Democrats, Reagan no longer has a bipartisan conservative majority, okay? So in one of their first acts, the Democrat majority just voted to kick Phil Gramm out of the budget committee. Okay, the president and the Republican then publicly urged Phil Gramm to change party, and but Phil Gramm said he was elected as a conservative Democrat, and he felt that if he just changed parties, and some people in his district might feel betrayed. So the only honorable thing Phil Gramm felt to do was to resign from the Congress and stand for election as a Republican. Well, many later saw this as a clever political move. It did not feel that way at that moment, okay? So no Republican candidate for Congress in the history of Phil Gramm's district have ever received more than 35% of the vote. And just 3 years ago, when he won his congressional election, he led his second runner only by 116 votes. Really, really close. Now he wanted to change party. So on the eve of Phil Gramm's resignation, he called Lee Atwater, who is the president's political director, to tell him what his plan. And then the Lee Atwater told Phil Gramm that he believed you will be defeated. And he just urged him simply just change parties, okay? And Phil Gramm said, I thought I could win, but it was the right thing to do regardless. So I'm going to do it. So Atwater rushed to Reagan's office and pleaded with him to call Phil Gramm to tell him that not to resign. But when the president called, the president started by asking, by telling him that Lee was on the verge of having a stroke, okay? Could you please explain what you are planning to do and why? So Phil Gramm explained to Reagan and told him that it was the right thing to do. To Gramm's astonishment, the president said, people have a way to judging a person's character and knowing when the man is doing right. I'm with you. All right? So Phil Gramm did not discover until later, until after he had resigned, he ran against the 9 Democrats and won that election. And he discovered later that the Lee Atwater had demanded that the president call him, of course. And Lee also predicted that. And Phil Gramm was going to lose. And in the wake of the 1982 defeats, that it would be the beginning of the end of the Reagan presidency. So Reagan responded like this: Lee, the whole world does not revolve around me or my presidency. This is about Phil Gramm. And he's doing the right thing. And I can live with whatever the result turns out to be. All right? So basically, at the end of his opinion commentary, Phil Gramm wrote that we could use a man like a Ronald Reagan again. All right, so after hearing this story, which I believe is right, I checked the Wikipedia. It was not a big deal, but it was recorded there, okay? So I don't know how you think about that. These are our politicians 40 years ago, how they process, how they deal with their duty, how they deal with their constituents. And today, just catering to the constituents with no regard of the country has become a, common phenomenon in our politics. And when Liz Cheney was calling for Democrats to elect him to help him to win in the Republican Party primary, I read around, I see no mainstream media have any word of condemning that act. I don't know about you. I read around, reporters just describe SAS like this is just another normal political move. Okay, actually, in this year's midterm election, from Georgia to Michigan, and the Democrats fund their, super PAC, they invest in on the Republican, okay, so that to help elect a weak Republican candidate, so that that person can be defeated in the November, in the final election. So the moral degradation of our people and our country has been all too, I don't want to use the word obvious because it's not obvious to many people, but it has been very, very clear compared to 40 years ago. But if we do not get to compare to 40 years ago, who would feel this is abnormal? So 40 years ago, if you still recall, President Reagan said more than once, when he was considering the national affairs, he never considered the political parties an interest. But today, for the politicians to consider their party's interest has become, has been normal, and it's been common. And the people took that for granted. And of course, you have to consider that way. But 40 years ago, when Phil Gramm feel that Democratic Party and no longer, just agree with him, he feel he cannot cheat on his constituents. So he resigned from his, from the House and went back to his district and rerun for the, position that he gave up. So if Phil Gramm does not write this opinion commentary, and this story will be buried in the sea of Wikipedia, because I went there, I did dig it out. Nobody would know. And nobody would know the Reagan story, how he convinced that 30 Republicans to vote for the bill, right? For that reconciliation bill. But in hindsight, what kind of character is that? Phil Gramm and President Reagan and those politicians at that time, those are the political norm 40 years ago. So that's the reason why we don't read it from history book, right? Because that is the blessing of that time. Because doing good things is so normal, it's so common. It's not worth recording. But today, from Georgia to Michigan to Wyoming, and to figure out whatever way, the end decide on the means. And whatever way, so that it can win, become the political norm today. And doing wrong things and doing bad things become common, and it just becomes so ordinary. So when we go back for 40 years in our history, we can see how our time have changed, how the time we live has changed. But if we go back to 240 years, then we compare us with the people at to the time of the pre-revolutionary. At that time, there was a moral reform, and I don't have time to go through that. But it was the people at that time. They were critical of themselves. They were thinking about, are we able to govern ourselves? Only people with moral can govern themselves. Now we recognize those founding fathers who has great characters. We only recognize those 2.5 million Americans, colonists in North America. They're worried for their nation. They're critical of themselves. In order to win freedom, they're willing to sacrifice everything. So today, we do not have, we don't have gunshot, we don't have, bomb smoke, but we face a similar crisis. There's no King George here, but we have the shadow of the communism, which is more vicious by 100 times. That is over our head. So when we worry about our country and the world we're in, when we worry about our future, do we realize how much our moral value has degenerated? And have we thought about a person with great character? What should we do? What's our duty? So I still think you remember the last ending words of our national anthem, right? Our national flag over the land of the free and the home of the brave, right? And I also recall that Benjamin Franklin, when he was during the break time of the Philadelphia Constitution Conference, he was stepping out of the room, and there was an inquiry. The curious citizen was asking, you closed door and for several months, what are you designing? And he said, a republic, if you can keep it. So what he meant is the moral value of America, right? So Ronald Reagan, Phil Gramm, and then many people 40 years ago, they used their courage to do the right thing. They break through, they overcome the defeat of the midterm election, and then they break through the risky and the scary inflation at that time. The inflation was higher than today, but they bring about at least 25 years economic prosperity of our nation. So today we're facing a bigger crisis. But if each of us can really do what is right and give our best, then I think what we do here we will stop the sliding of America. And also, this could be the opportunity for us to reflect our root, our value, where we come from, reflect upon the moral value that we had and we lost. And then go from here and go back to our history, to our root. And that could enable another 240 years freedom and prosperity. That's what I really feel about. Okay, yeah, thank you for viewing today. Let me see how you think. I have you here. And so how do you think Phil Gramm's words? And do you think that in a similar situation, okay, Liz Cheney, she just go to the other camp, to come over here, help me, just win in the Republican. Those people, about at least 10,000 people switch over. They don't feel any guilty about that. And of course, Liz Cheney doesn't feel any guilty. And I think the media, whatever, nobody feels there's a big problem. It's just a maneuver. She needs to win, so what? But compared to 40 years ago, it was a different world, isn't it? Okay. Fightless Bird said, yes, I remember. All right. And then Drake Max Band said, okay, I remember. And Book said, it doesn't matter how you get here, but you will want to know a few things. Since you are here, you can do the research. Good luck, kid. You will need it. I'm not so sure I understand. Maybe you guys have some conversation before that. Anyway, so Book said, Phil Gramm seems like he knew what integrity was. Yes. Yeah. I think the integrity, the character integrity, those are very, very important. Okay. So, all right. That's the sharing I want to have with you tonight. And all right. Thank you very much. I hope you like my program, and leave your comment, okay? And what do you wish to hear? News about China, about U.S. and Taiwan, and we'll definitely consider that. Okay, great to have you with us tonight. Thank you. Take care. Good night. See you tomorrow.